What is coming to Australian tax changes?
It is significant, and actually, there's some great individuals that will talk in a bit more detail to this, but at a high level, will be the test case for new tax changes that will severely steal wealth from the population. So we're changing our capital gains tax. So in Australia, if you own an asset, you're subject to your marginal tax rate on any profits that you gain. So let's just say Bitcoin goes from $10 to $100, you made a $90 profit, you would get taxed at your marginal tax rate. And in Australia, the top tax rate is 45% plus 2% for our Medicare levy. So it's close to 47%. But then in the late 90s, the government introduced a 50% discount, which meant that if you held the asset for longer than 12 months, you could take a 50% discount on that taxable gain event. So instead of paying the 47%, you're paying sort of like 22.5% was the capital gains. So that's the system we've been operating in since the late 90s, early
But
2000s or
that's
so.
only when you sell, right?
Only when you sell. So if you choose to sell.
So
Now,
you are basically treating capital gains as income, like other countries would treat the income tax.
yeah, correct. So it just gets that capital gain gets added to your income for the year, and then your tax rate is then applied across that total balance. So our top tax rate kicks in, I think, at about $190,000, and then anything above $190,000 is taxed at 45%. Every dollar, the government takes 45 above that amount. So the problem is if you're a full-time worker in Australia and earning a six-figure salary, 120, 130, 140, then effectively any major sale of Bitcoin is going to push you straight into that top marginal tax bracket, which gets you taxed at that 45%. Now, what the government is doing now is actually going to remove that 50% discount and actually just charge you the full tax rate and give you indexation based on inflation. So instead of the discount, they'll say, okay, you bought an asset in 2020 at $100. What's been the CPI? It's been 3%. All right, we'll adjust your purchase price for the amount of years that you've held it and the CPI increase. So that if that's 3% over 10 years, just basic math, 30%. So your $100 buy price is now $130. But if you sell it for 10,000 or you sell it for 5,000 or you sell it for $1,000, let's just say you 10x the investment. And in Bitcoin over a 10-year period from where it is now, a lot of us would say that's a more than likely scenario. Then you're going to be paying 45% on 870 of that gain at 45 to 47%. So now the government's almost taking half of the gains of you taking the risk of owning Bitcoin here. And so for someone like myself that had an exit path out of Bitcoin, not completely, but to exit myself out of the fiat system, so pay off the home loan so I'm not slave to the bank anymore, give myself some financial freedom to pursue the things that I want to pursue, that has now been effectively destroyed if this passes through legislation. So this is what the government are saying they're about to do. It goes to the parliament to get voted on, I think, in the next couple of months. And if it does, it takes effect the 1st of July, 2027. But if it does, it could add upward of 3 to 4 years of me having to hold even longer before I reach a sale price that exits me out of the fiat system. And so the government
Now,
has effectively taxed us time as well as a huge sum of money.
now, when I researched Bitcoin the first time, I came across Seyr saying things like you can't tax Bitcoin because it's the most, f- f- it's the most, it's the easiest asset that can flee out of a country. He
Yep.
brought up that example of a small Italian harbor where all the rich people came in. Then they tried to tax the rich people that were in the boats because the people said it's unfair. The rich people all left the town, didn't have any money. They went broke, so they reduced the tax again. Then we have like many other examples of like you want to tax the real estate because it cannot leave the jurisdiction. It cannot leave
Yep.
Australia, USA, like wherever you are from. But you should not tax something that is easily transportable outside of the country, outside of the jurisdiction, because if you do that, it will just fly outside of the country and outside of the jurisdiction. And I feel like you probably also have done the calculation, like how much money you potentially could save to build your
Yep.
family just by not participating in that system and just like living somewhere else. And there are other beautiful places in the world. It's not just one country. And you said before we started recording that you also are big in history of economics. So I'm curious, what is your point of view on taxes and Bitcoin and the government? Kind of like, what is kind of that the tension field between an asset that you can't really like you can just like not have it, like you can just say like, what is the tension field kind of for you looking?
So I say Bitcoin is in, call it cyberspace. So yes, it gives you that ability to just move wherever you want. It's completely decentralized. We all sort of know that story. But the problem is we're all physical in the real in the physical world, and we live, we've got families, we've got friends, we've got homes from which we build emotional connections to. And so you're sort of having to bring the two together. My personal view is I'm happy, funnily enough, to pay tax. I've got zero issues with that because I think that there's an element of societal cohesion where you should contribute to your broader community on certain things. So whether it's like a Milton Friedman view of the world or a Thomas Sowell view of the world, which is just minimal government, defend the borders, protect property rights, ensure that there is police and emergency services, so that I think is like sort of like a minimum standard, and I actually go a bit beyond that for me personally, just based on my own value set. Knowing people and myself being a director on on a nonprofit board here in Australia, I know that there are those that are hit with life circumstances that sometimes a safety net is a good thing, not just for helping them out, but for social cohesion and to create a country with a set of values that you want to be a part of. So I'm quite happy to pay tax if I know that the government is using that tax money effectively to deliver against the promises it makes to the people. So, with that out of the way, then it comes to, are they actually doing that? And the answer is absolutely not. So, we can already see fraud, abuse, and waste of public funds. There's a scandal every other day, and it's so frequent now that it's almost become the norm. Everybody knows politicians rort the system in many ways, that money doesn't always go to the areas that it should. So in Australia, we've got a scheme called the National Disability Insurance Scheme. Full disclosure, I sit on the board of an organization that provides disability support services. So I get a unique view on that. I know that they do a lot of good, a significant amount of good. There are people that are getting a life that otherwise would not have, and a quality of life, I should say, that they otherwise would not have received. But I also know that the way in which the government has set up the system, that it has allowed for a significant amount of fraud and abuse of the system. And so there is millions of dollars going out the door by people that can undermine the system. So how government applies and uses those funds are what I think are in question. And right now, I have no real faith that the Australian government, for the extra taxes that they may get from my Bitcoin holdings, is going to yield any positive results for where I'm at. And so I'm almost at the point of saying, is this a time to opt out? But that comes with a heavy burden. My wife's family is here, my family is here. Um, I want to raise my kids here, but is that worth how much is that worth to be here? And you sort of have to now weigh it up. Is it multiple six figures of tax in order to stay here or move to another country where we don't have the same sort of support network, social network, and have to start from scratch? How much is that money actually worth? And so we're going through that debate at the moment. Um, and to be honest with this and with my view on Bitcoin, where it's going to land 2030, 2032, which was sort of my time horizon for making my first sale to get out of my fiat commitments, maybe.
I I brought that up recently actually in a live stream, there are different I like Europe a lot. Just as a livable place on planet Earth. It's a very beautiful place. You have the Nordic countries. You have the uh, South countries with the beaches and all. Like you have a very like if you know Europe is a very beautiful place to live.
That it is.
Um, and with the European Union, and I'm not one that saves with things that I don't like about the European Union. There's a lot of things I really don't like on it. But one thing I really like about it, it's very easy if you're a European Union citizen to move within the European
Yep.
Union. So do just travel to another country. It's like you just pack your things and you go there. It's really not that bureaucratic. I already tried it out. I lived for 1.5 years in Germany. I worked there. It was super easy. You go go to the Austrian bureaucracy and say, "Hey, no longer here. Please give me confirmation." Then you go to where you went. I went to Munich, to Germany. I went to the Munich office. I went there, said, "Hey, I'm now here. Please give me confirmation that I'm now here. That's my address." They're like, "Okay, you are now here." That's it. Like it's super easy to move within
That
the
is very
European
cool.
Union. A little bit like it's easy to move within the United States of America. People
Yep.
forget that United States of America, it's not one country. It's like multiple countries into one country. So like
50
the
states.
states. And so I really like that setup because you have the option to like move not that far and still like have that competition also between each other because we have Czech Republic which has a marginal tax rate of 23%. Austria goes up to 55%. Italy
Oh, damn.
47. Great Britain 45, Ireland 48, but then the corporate tax rate, for example, in Ireland is like 12%,
Yep.
Austria 23. So like there's all those different kind of tax rates, and they are competing with each other. And so I like that a lot. Like the living standard in a lot of European countries is similar, and the tax are different, which means there is competition between those countries to be the best place where talent can go. Where I wanted to go with that is do you think that this model of different countries competing for talents, competing for the best capital, the best companies, the best heads of the world will continue and actually spread out and get decentralized? Or is
100%.
that kind of China thing like centralization, globalization kind of coming on us?
Well, I don't know whether the view of China's centralization would be accurate in certain parts, right? Because they are the manufacturing hub, and I think they're what 30-40% of global manufacturing. And so yes, it is you can call it a superpower in that part. But the rhetoric, when I'm listening to podcasts and hearing others talk on this, is that we're shifting towards a multipolar world, whether that be no longer US homogeny, but rather you'll have the European part, you'll have China. I think India will be its own as well. You're now starting to see the rise of ASEAN countries, so the Southeast Asian countries now coming together and doing some interesting stuff. So I'm originally from Malaysia before my parents migrated to Australia. So that's part of that ASEAN group of Singapore, think Vietnam, Thailand, the Philippines, sort of that part of Southeast Asia will have its own appeal. And the reason why I said I don't think it'll necessarily be centralization per se towards China, I think that that's just what's above the surface. Um, I'm looking at Malaysia because I've still got a lot of family there, and we're seeing, well, I'm seeing from afar, a significant amount of investment. And if you look at their adoption in that region of AI, for example, it is significantly higher than what we're doing here in Australia. And you would think that as a Western democratic nation that is first world and enjoyed higher standards of living for as long as we have, that we would be on the front of that adoption curve. But in actual fact, we are so far behind the curve. And we've got, if anything, a hesitance toward AI and that particular type of adoption, whereas you don't see that from what I can see. Again, I don't live in those countries, but you just don't see that anywhere near as much amongst the Asian countries. So I think the things that keeping, for example, the European Union together and that ability to move between those countries will start to potentially break down as people realize, okay, I can see the ease of life. It's very similar to what I'm used to. It's comfortable. And yeah, this country's 23% tax, this one's 40% tax, etc. But what if you just went to Malaysia and you go to Labuan and you set up a company with 0% tax and zero capital gains tax? And you're in an Asian country that's been advancing their infrastructure so quickly and the standards of living have now increased significantly. You probably say the same thing about Vietnam. You could say the same thing about Thailand, who are offering better deals. I think that the rise of those nations will start to challenge the homogeny of other blocks, European Union being a bloc, and who knows what's going to happen across the African continent over the next 50 years. And so if you sort of zoom out and you say, well, what is the potential now that information flows so freely and countries are starting to advance much faster post World War II in a way that we haven't seen? I say the competition is going to increase. And so you'll find niches of things that might suit you better outside of what we're traditionally used to. And so, like, as an example, and the only reason why I raise that is that I'm considering Malaysia as an example as a potential plan B. We're so far from making that call, but Malaysia would be that bet for me, not going into Europe, not going to the US and certain one of those states, because values wise, it aligns better to me than anywhere else in the world.
And there are many forces that bring us there. If you think about remote work, if you think about the move from huge companies and corporations towards more corporations that are smaller, like startups with like 10, 15 people. Now with AI and automation, it's way easier to have a small, efficient company with, let's say, 5 to 50 people that has huge economic output than it was previously.
Yep.
Previously, you needed like hundreds, 200, 500, maybe thousands of people to have the same economic output that you now have with 50 to 100 people. And so that is something which makes individual life more movable and have you remote work. Bitcoin is a huge factor, just like money that doesn't really fit into jurisdictional thinking because you can just take it with you. Cash is hard to take with you. A bank account is impossible. They will always know that it's literally their property almost.
Yep.
Gold very hard with like border controls and all of that. So like like Bitcoin is the only asset that I take serious that you can do those things with. And so that's like we're moving very fast in that direction, I feel like.
We're moving very fast. I'm not quite on. Well, and again, it comes from the fact that I'm an Australian citizen, and so my ability to be portable with my money, I'm not in a jurisdiction where that risk is anywhere near as high as if I was coming out of an African continent or maybe one of the Southeast Asian countries. And so right now, I think over the next 5 years, my portability is actually quite good, even with the Australian dollar as its foundation. Sure, I'll pay exit taxes, but they're not going to stop me per se. They'll just say what we call in Australia as deemed disposal. If I stop being a tax resident, the government assumes that I've sold everything. I pay the capital gains tax. I say, thank you very much. Here's my dues, and off you go. And then I can go and do whatever I want at the moment. But to the point of that may not always be the case. So over the next 5, 10 years, I don't see that shifting so substantially that it would become prohibitive. I think the taxes will make it prohibitive. So there'll be a commercial cost to doing that. But the problem that I've got here is that because I used fiat to buy the Bitcoin through a registered exchange here in Australia that came from my Australian bank account where my fiat was held, my tax office already knows that I've got it because they knows that it went to the exchange. The exchange has got the records. They are compliant against Australian laws and regulations, and so they know what I've got. And so if I flee with my Bitcoin to try and not pay the tax, then effectively what I'm saying is I don't intend to return to this country at all. And I absolutely want to return to this country if I ever made the decision to leave. And so you sort of have to still play within the rules per se. Um, but sort of bringing that back to where it started, which was yes, Bitcoin is great. I think absolutely. I wouldn't be a Bitcoiner if I wasn't, but I'm not as big of a doomer in the short to medium term, I'll call it. The next 5 to 10 years, I still think that if you're in a Western democratic country, European democratic country, um, they will maintain, even if we think it's an illusion, they'll maintain that illusion for quite a bit longer, because the moment that they remove that illusion, the whole system breaks down.
Thank you for watching this video. This was only a snippet of the podcast. And if you want to watch the full episode and get all of the context of this episode, you can click right here or here. Oh, maybe also here.